Time to have a conversation about Game Pass. Xbox is, it's I'm not going to say it's in trouble, because ultimately, when it's all said and done, they have Microsoft money. Okay, Xbox, for as long as they want to be, as long as they want to make video games, they're going to have the finances to make video games. It's legitimately a drop in the pond when it comes to Microsoft's overall finances. Whether or not they want to continue on with this vanity project, it's just, are they getting to a point where their business strategy is becoming too much of a detriment on the industry and for developers in general, where they're going to be forced to course correct and return to a more conventional release schedule? Because at some point, there's not going to be enough studios, there's not going to be enough developers to sign up for this death march. So yes, you got a former Xbox VP admits Game Pass causes problems, as media admits 3 million players is not 3 million sales. Because we just got, I just did the video on Hollow Knight, okay, Hollow Knight Silksong, and even just on Steam alone, I haven't seen anything official from Team Cherry, even at this point in time, how many official sales that they have, but it kind of looks like they have 3 million sales on Steam alone, and the game is still absolutely killing it right now, even though they just put out a controversial patch for the first couple of bosses, because, you know, people are bitches about this type of stuff, and, oh, it's too difficult. Like, shut up, get good at games. But no, I'm not entirely sure who came out with the numbers, mostly because I don't find it all that interesting, but yeah, they've engaged 5 million players so far. Well, we can see it's like there's a lot of people that are out there, and very few people are deriding the game. So I would lend credence to the claim that at least 3 million sales on Steam, and we will very likely see in the very near future how many sales the game has got. Because yeah, this has been patently obvious for everybody who has been following this newspeak out of AAA developers in recent years. Yes, players are not sales. Dragon Age the Veilguard, Assassin's Creed Shadows, I think was the most egregious, but also Doom the Dark Ages. Remember, guys, we have all of these players. Haven't really heard any follow-ups on that super amazing, fantastic game that is definitely not a flop. No, didn't hear anything about that, but a lot of those games, and a ton I didn't mention, have come out simultaneously on Game Pass or another subscription service. And how many of those games, when they did ultimately flop, went through massive rounds of layoffs? BioWare essentially gutted. Ubisoft had to sell 25% of their company off to China. id Software so far, haven't heard anything out of them. But then again, haven't heard like a shift up type situation where after their back end sales for Stellar Blade comes out, they're giving bonuses to their staff and go ahead and greenlighting a sequel. But Microsoft probably needs to just cool it on layoffs for the time being. But let's take a look at this here real quickly, because for years, gamers have debated whether subscription models like Game Pass are helping the industry or causing problems. I mean, for on the consumer side of things, like Game Pass is a tremendous deal. It's just, I don't get it from a financial standpoint, how it works on the other side of that equation. It does not compute at all whatsoever. It's just like your subscription services when it comes to your television and movies. If you want to put your old back catalog that is literally doing nothing except for clogging up space on a hard drive, you want to put it out there for people to watch, $10 a month, that's all well and good. But when you're putting on brand new, high profile, high priced movies, like Netflix dropping $100-200 million on a movie that, you know, it might trend, it might chart for a week or two, but then it just gets resigned to the dustbin of history, you can't continue to do that long term. Well, you can if you're the only game in town, and that's why Netflix is riding high right now. But there's a reason that Disney had to fold Hulu and ESPN in with the failing Disney Plus in order to make them look more successful. And even still, now they don't have to announce how many subscribers they're hemorrhaging on a quarterly basis, but Paramount has to get bought out because they were wasting way too much money on their projects. And Peacock is very likely looking for a buyer to merge with because nobody's watching that service. And hell, their most popular content, the WWE pay-per-views, just flew the coop for a lucrative deal over at ESPN. So if it doesn't work when it comes to normies, just signing up for subscription services to watch TV, old reruns of Friends and Suits and Skins and all that shit, why would it work long-term for gaming? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But yes, in a new piece from PC Gamer, former Bethesda VP of Communications and Marketing Pete Hines, revealed the Game Pass created what he called weird intertensions, particularly when it comes to how the service values content and impacts game sales. If you don't figure out how to balance the needs of the service and the people running the service with the people who are providing the content, there's a lot of people and services and content, anyways, without which your subscription is worth jack jack shit, then you have a real problem, Pete said. Hines explained that while subscription platforms like Game Pass can drive engagement, they can also cause problems and backfire badly when the numbers don't translate to actual revenue. I agree wholeheartedly. The most striking admission came from an article highlighted Tango Gameworks' Hi-Fi Rush. Yes, marketed as a breakout success with 3 million players on Game Pass, the studio behind it was nonetheless shuttered by Microsoft. Yeah, that was one of the big closures. Arkane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and a couple of other support studios were closed down. God, what was that, at the beginning of 2024? Yes. PC Gamer then pointed out obvious truths that many in the gaming community have stressed for years. A truth that mainstream access games journalists have ignored until now. 3 million players isn't the same as 3 million sales. It's a crucial distinction, and one that publishers often blur when hyping up numbers. Player counts on Game Pass make for good headlines, but if the retail sales are cannibalized, the studio may actually be worse off than before. But Pete wasn't the only executive interviewed by PC Gamer. In fact, there were other people making some very interesting admissions from the inside. And one of those is the majority of games adoption on Game Pass comes at the expense of retail revenue. You need to properly acknowledge, compensate, and recognize what it takes to create the content and not just make a game, but make a product, Hines said in a recent interview with Double Tap. The tension is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, because they're fitting into an ecosystem that is not properly valuing and rewarding what they're making. In a subsequent message posted on LinkedIn, former World's Edge studio head and Xbox Game Studio vice president Shannon Loftis acknowledged the issue, writing, "As a longtime first-party Xbox developer, I can attest that Pete is correct. While Game Pass, GP, can claim a few victories with games that otherwise would have sunk beneath the waves, human fall flat, the majority of game adoption on GP comes at the expense of retail revenue, unless the game is engineered from the ground up for post-release monetization," Loftis wrote. "I could and may someday write pages on the weird inner tensions this creates." Exactly. If you're not creating, like live service games, I think that they're perfect for subscription services, Hell, that was the model with MMORPGs, with World of Warcraft, RuneScape, all that shit back in the cut. When you're keeping people hooked, drip feeding them content on a regular basis, yeah, that totally makes sense to have this big old wide-reaching, overarching subscription service. That makes sense. But when it comes to just indie games, single-player games, I don't know, man. You kind of live and die by your sales on that one. You can't just immediately throw them up on storefront like that. Like, if you have old back catalog like Xbox, you're into your 4th generation of hardware, that totally makes sense, and you keep on buying up studios that have old back catalog as well, yeah, throw them up there. You're not selling them, or at least not in numbers where it really matters, and yeah, that's where you get your value. That's why people, when Disney Plus was initially launched, that's why so many families signed up for the service, because yeah, I could just throw on an old, Disney cartoon that I know is good for my kids, and yeah, just, let them chill out for a while, or throw on one of those old shows like Chippendale's Rescue Rangers or Gargoyles or old Mickey Mouse cartoons. Like, that would all be great. Now, when you're wasting $230 million on The Acolyte, $90 million on Kenobi, $212 million on She-Hulk, you have to start to wonder, for $10, $12, $15 a month, how many people need to tune in for the slop that everybody is roasting in order to make it worthwhile? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And then when it comes to production budgets, a lot of that stuff, especially for AAA games and coming out of Xbox studios, you're working with similar, if not even bigger budgets. And as I've talked about recently, I think I got a video that's probably coming out before the end of the year. I got some plans for some stuff, but don't worry about it. But you got to wonder, the stagnant number of Game Pass subscribers, how can you justify flop after flop? You really can't. Games on Game Pass don't make as much as they potentially could if they were not available on the service, because people can play them without actually buying them. They get full access to their flat, unchanging monthly subscription fee. The counter argument is that not everybody playing on Game Pass would pay for all of the games they play. Would Hi-Fi Rush have managed more than 3 million copies sold if it wasn't available on Game Pass? Well, I mean, if it's a great game, it gets a proper attention, and then it's set at a reasonable price point. How many examples do we have this year of games coming out of literally nowhere, and they're going to be dominating the dais when Game of the Year is discussed? Hollow Knight coming in at $20, Claire Obscure, Expedition 33 coming in at $50. Even under the Xbox umbrella, you got the Oblivion Remaster coming in at $50. What full price AAA game is even in that conversation? I kind of think, well, there's one that comes to mind, and Death Stranding over there at Sony, and even Sony can see from the outside looking in. Okay, Game Pass makes a developer's wage slaves, former PlayStation boss says, and he is 1,000% correct. Former PlayStation boss has commented on on Game Pass, stating that it isn't inspiring for developers to make them makes them wage slaves rather. Game Pass is not creating value. During an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, former Sony Worldwide Studios chairman Sean Layden spoke candidly about Game Pass as a service. Layden first said that there are many debates about Game Pass profitability and that it's not the right question to ask. Companies can do all kinds of financial jiggery-pokery, that's a new term, for any sort of corporate service and make it look profitable. Especially within Microsoft, they can hide it and they can move around money. Hate to bring up the Disney example again, but when they paid themselves to license a movie like Thor: Love and Thunder to say, hey guys, look at it, broke even because we paid ourselves to put it on our own service, it's like, come on, man, we know what you're doing. The real question here is Game Pass healthy for the developer? Exactly. Layden elaborates that the subscription model of Game Pass makes developers essentially wage slaves. The service is not creating value by putting the games in the marketplace, hoping that it does well, and then you profit share and overages. This is basic business, man. According to Layden, it's more like you pay me X dollars an hour. I built you a game. Here, go put it on your servers. He concluded, stating he doesn't think Game Pass is really inspiring for game developers. I would have to agree 100%. Like I said before, it's like Game Pass is a tremendous value for the consumers. But when it comes to the overall health of the industry, if it wasn't for Microsoft money, this shit wouldn't be happening. And the moment that they decide that, yeah, we need to start plugging these leaks is the moment that even more studios, even more layoffs are going to be shuttered, closed, and burnt down. And especially with a new console cycle starting to pick up in the next couple of years, yeah, we're going to see a lot of inflection here, and a lot of it, if you thought that the past couple of years when it comes to closures and layoffs have been bad, we ain't seen nothing yet. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.